The Dawnbreakers. Introductory Note. It is my intention, by the aid and assistance of God, to devote the introductory pages of this narrative to such accounts as I have been able to obtain regarding those twin great lights, Sheikh Ahmadi Asai and Sayyid Kazemi Rashdi, after which it is my hope to recount in their chronological order the chief events that have happened since the year 60, the year that witnessed the declaration of the faith by the Bab, until the present time, the year 1305 AH. In certain instances I shall go into some detail. In others I shall content myself with a brief summary of events. I shall place on record a description of the episodes I myself have witnessed, as well as those that have been reported to me by trustworthy and recognized informants, specifying in every case their names and standing. To those who I am primarily indebted are the following: Mirza Ahmadi Kazvini, the Bab's amanuensis; Sayyid Ismaili Zabeh, Sheikh Hassan-e Zanusi, Sheikh Abu Turabi Kazvini, and last but not least Mirza Musa Ake Kalim, brother of Bahá'u'lláh. I render thanks to God for having assisted me in the writing of these preliminary pages, and for having blessed and honored them with the approval of Bahá'u'lláh, who has graciously deigned to consider them, and who signified through his amanuensis Mirza Akajan, who read them to him, his pleasure and acceptance. I pray that the Almighty may sustain and guide me, lest I err and falter in the task I have set myself to accomplish. Muhammad E. Zarandi, Akka, Palestine, 1305 AH. The Dawnbreakers, Chapter 1. The Mission of Sheikh Ahmadi Asai. At a time when the shining reality of the faith of Muhammad had been obscured by the ignorance, the fanaticism and perversity of the contending sects into which it had fallen, there appeared above the horizon of the east that luminous star of divine guidance, Sheikh Ahmadi Asai. He observed how those who professed the faith of Islam had shattered its unity, sapped its force, perverted its purpose, and degraded its holy name. His soul was filled with anguish at the sight of the corruption and strife which characterized the Shi'i sect of Islam. Inspired by the light that shone within him, he arose with unerring vision, with fixed purpose, and sublime detachment to utter his protest against the betrayal of the faith by that ignoble people. Aglow with zeal and conscious of the sublimity of his calling, he vehemently appealed not only to Shia Islam, but to all the followers of Muhammad throughout the East, to awaken from the slumber of negligence, and to prepare the way for him who must needs be made manifest in the fullness of time, whose light alone could dissipate the mists of prejudice and ignorance which had enveloped that faith. Forsaking his home and kindred on one of the islands of Bahrain to the south of the Persian Gulf, he set out, as bidden by an almighty providence, to unravel the mysteries of those verses of Islamic scriptures which foreshadowed the advent of a new manifestation. He was well aware of the dangers and perils that beset his path. He fully realized the crushing responsibility of his task. There burned in his soul the conviction that no reform, however drastic within the faith of Islam, could achieve the regeneration of this perverse people. He knew, and was destined by the will of God to demonstrate, that nothing short of a new and independent revelation, as attested and foreshadowed by the sacred scriptures of Islam, could revive the fortunes and restore the purity of that decadent faith. Bereft of all earthly possessions and detached from all save God, he, in the early days of the 13th century of the Hegira, when 40 years of age, arose to dedicate the remaining days of his life to the task he felt impelled to shoulder. He first proceeded to Najaf and Karbala, where in a few years he acquired familiarity with the prevailing thoughts and standards current among the learned men of Islam. There he came to be recognized as one of the authorized expounders of the Islamic Holy Writ, was declared a mujtahid, and soon obtained an ascendancy over the rest of his colleagues, who either visited or were residing in those holy cities. These came to regard him as one initiated into the mysteries of divine revelation, and qualified to unravel the abstruse utterances of Muhammad and of the imams of the faith. As his influence increased and the scope of his authority widened, he found himself besieged on every side by an ever-increasing number of devoted inquirers, who asked to be enlightened regarding the intricacies of the faith, all of which he ably and fully expounded. By his knowledge and fearlessness he struck terror to the hearts of the Sufis and Neoplatonists and other kindred schools of thought, who envied his learning and feared his ruthlessness. Thereby he acquired added favor in the eyes of those learned divines who looked upon these sects as the disseminators of obscure and heretical doctrines. Yet great as was his fame, and universal as was the esteem with which he was regarded, he despised all the honors which his admirers lavished upon him. He marveled at their servile devotion to dignity and rank, and refused resolutely to associate himself with the objects of their pursuits and desires. Having achieved his purpose in those cities, and inhaling the fragrance which wafted upon him from Persia, he felt in his heart an irrepressible yearning to hasten to that country. He concealed from his friends, however, the real motive that impelled him to direct his steps toward that land. By way of the Persian Gulf, he hastened unto the land of his heart's desire, ostensibly for the purpose of visiting the shrine of the Imam Reza in Mashhad. He was filled with eagerness to unburden his soul, and searched zealously for those to whom he could deliver the secret, which to no one he had as yet divulged. Upon his arrival at Shiraz, the city which enshrined that concealed treasure of God, and from which the voice of the herald of a new manifestation was destined to be proclaimed, he repaired to the Masjid-i-Jomeh, a mosque which in its style and shape bore a striking resemblance to the holy shrine of Mecca. Many a time did he, whilst gazing upon that edifice, observe, "Verily, this house of God betokens such signs as only those who are endowed with understanding can perceive. Methinks he who conceived and built it was inspired of God." How often and how passionately he extolled that city! Such was the praise he lavished upon it that his hearers, who were only too familiar with its mediocrity, were astonished at the tone of his language. "Wonder not," he said to those who were surprised, "for ere long the secret of my words will be made manifest to you. Among you there shall be a number who will live to behold the glory of a day which the prophets of old have yearned to witness." So great was his authority in the eyes of the ulamas who met and conversed with him, that they professed themselves incapable of comprehending the meaning of his mysterious allusions, and ascribed their failure to their own deficient understanding. Having sown the seeds of divine knowledge in the hearts of those whom he found receptive to his call, Sheikh Ahmad set out for Yazd, where he tarried a while, engaged continually in the dissemination of such truths as he felt urged to reveal. Most of his books and epistles were written in that city. Such was the fame he acquired, that the ruler of Persia, Fath Ali Shah, was moved to address to him from Tehran a written message, calling upon him to explain certain specific questions related to the abstruse teachings of the Muslim faith, the meaning of which the leading ulamas of his realm had been unable to unfold. To this he readily answered in the form of an epistle, to which he gave the name Risale-i Sultaniyeh. The Shah was so pleased with the tone and subject matter of that epistle that he forthwith sent him a second message, this time extending to him an invitation to visit his court. Replying to this second imperial message, he wrote the following: "As I had intended ever since my departure from Najaf and Karbala to visit and pay homage to the shrine of the Imam Reza in Mashhad, I venture to hope that your Imperial Majesty will graciously allow me to fulfill the vow which I have made. Later on, God willing, it is my hope and purpose to avail myself of the honor which your Imperial Majesty has deigned to confer upon me." Among those who in the city of Yazd were awakened by the message of that bearer of the light of God was Haji Abdu'l-Bahá, a man of great piety, upright and God-fearing. He visited Sheikh Ahmad each day in the company of a certain Mullah Abdul Khalik Yazdi, who was noted for his authority and learning. On certain occasions, however, in order to talk confidentially with Abdu'l-Bahá, Sheikh Ahmad, to the great surprise of the learned Abdul Khalik, would ask him to retire from his presence and leave him alone with his chosen and favored disciple. This marked preference, shown to so modest and illiterate a man as Abdu'l-Bahá, was a cause of great surprise to his companion, who was only too conscious of his own superiority and attainments. Later, however, when Sheikh Ahmad had departed from Yazd, Abdu'l-Bahá retired from the society of men and came to be regarded as a Sufi. By the orthodox leaders of that community, however, such as the Ne'matullah and the Zahabi, he was denounced as an intruder and was suspected of a desire to rob them of their leadership. Abdu'l-Bahá, for whom the Sufi doctrine had no special attraction, scorned their false imputations and shunned their society. He associated with none except Haji Hassan-e Nayani, whom he had chosen as his intimate friend and to whom he confided the secret with which he had been entrusted by his master. When Abdu'l-Bahá died, this friend, following his example, continued to pursue the path which he had directed him to tread, and announced to every receptive soul the tidings of God's fast approaching revelation. Mirza Mahmud-e Khamsari, whom I met in Kashan, and who was at the time an old man over 90 years of age, and was greatly beloved and revered by all those who knew him, related to me the following story. I recall when in my youth, at the time when I was living in Kashan, I heard of a certain man in Nayen who had arisen to announce the tidings of a new revelation, and under whose spell fell all who heard him, whether scholars, officials of the government, or the uneducated among the people. His influence was such that those who came in contact with him renounced the world and despised its riches. Curious to ascertain the truth, I proceeded, unsuspected by my friends, to Nayen, where I was able to verify the statements that were current about him. His radiant countenance bespoke the light that had been kindled in his soul. I heard him one day, after he had offered his morning prayer, speak words such as these: "Ere long will the earth be turned into a paradise. Ere long will Persia be made the shrine round which will circle the peoples of the earth." One morning, at the hour of dawn, I found him fallen upon his face, repeating in rapt devotion the words, "Allahu Akbar." To my great surprise, he turned to me and said, "That which I have been announcing to you is now revealed. At this very hour, the light of the Promised One has broken and is shedding illumination upon the world. O Mahmud, verily I say, you shall live to behold that day of days." The words which that holy man addressed to me kept ringing in my ears, until the day when in the year 60 I was privileged to hear the call that arose from Shiraz. I was, alas, unable, because of my infirmities, to hasten to that city. Later, when the Bab, the herald of the new revelation, arrived in Kashan, and for 3 nights lived as a guest in the house of Haji Mirza Jani, I was unaware of his visit, and so missed the honor of attaining his presence. Some time afterwards, whilst conversing with the followers of the faith, I was informed that the birthday of the Bab fell on the first day of the month of Muharram in the year 1235 A.H. I realized that the day to which Haji Hassan-e Nayani had referred did not correspond with this date, that there was actually a difference of 2 years between them. This thought sorely perplexed me. Long after, however, I met a certain Haji Mirza Kamal-ad-Din-e-Naraghi, who announced to me the revelation of Bahá'u'lláh in Baghdad, and who shared with me a number of verses from the Qasida-i Varga'iyya, as well as certain passages of the Persian and Arabic hidden words. I was moved to the depth of my soul as I heard him recite those sacred words. The following I still vividly remember. O Son of Being, Thy heart is my home. Sanctify it for my descent. Thy spirit is my place of revelation. Cleanse it for my manifestation. O Son of Earth, wouldst thou have me, seek none other than me, and wouldst thou gaze upon my beauty, close thine eyes to the world and all that is therein. For my will, and the will of another than I, even as fire and water, cannot dwell together in one heart. I asked him the date of the birth of Bahá'u'lláh. The dawn of the second day of Muharram, he replied, in the year 1233 AH. I immediately remembered the words of Haji Hassan and recalled the day on which they were spoken. Instinctively I fell prostrate on the ground and exclaimed, Glorified art thou, O my God, for having enabled me to attain unto this promised day. If now I be called to thee, I die content and assured. That very year, the year 1274 AH, that venerable and radiant soul yielded his spirit to God. This account, which I heard from the lips of Mirza Mahmud Kamsari himself, and which is still current amongst the people, is assuredly a compelling evidence of the perspicacity of the late Sheikh Ahmad Yasai, and bears eloquent testimony to the influence he exercised upon his immediate disciples. The promise he gave them was eventually fulfilled, and the mystery with which he fired their souls was unfolded in all its glory. During those days when Sheikh Ahmad was preparing to depart from Yazd, Sayyid Kazem-e-Rashdi, that other luminary of divine guidance, set out from his native province of Gilan with the object of visiting Sheikh Ahmad, ere the latter undertook his pilgrimage to Khorasan. In the course of his first interview with him, Sheikh Ahmad spoke these words, I welcome you, O my friend. How long and how eagerly have I waited for you to come and deliver me from the arrogance of this perverse people. I am oppressed by the shamelessness of their acts and the depravity of their character. Verily, we propose to the heavens and to the earth and to the mountains to receive the trust of God. But they refused the burden, and they feared to receive it. Man undertook to bear it, and he verily hath proved unjust, ignorant. This Sayyid Kazem had already from his early boyhood shown signs of remarkable intellectual power and spiritual insight. He was unique among those of his own rank and age. At the age of 11, he had committed to memory the whole of the Quran. At the age of 14, he had learned by heart a prodigious number of prayers and recognized traditions of Muhammad. At the age of 18, he had composed a commentary on the verse of the Quran known as Ayatul Kursi, which had excited the wonder and the admiration of the most learned of his day. His piety, the gentleness of his character, and his humility were such that all who knew him, whether young or old, were profoundly impressed. In the year 1231 AH, when only 22 years old, he, forsaking home, kindred, and friends, departed from Gilan, intent upon attaining the presence of him who had so nobly arisen to announce the approaching dawn of a divine revelation. He had been in the company of Sheikh Ahmad for only a few weeks, when the latter, turning to him one day, addressed him in these words, Remain in your house, and cease attending my lectures. Such of my disciples as may feel perplexed will turn henceforth to you, and will seek to obtain from you directly what assistance they may require. You will, through the knowledge which the Lord your God has bestowed upon you, resolve their problems and tranquilize their hearts. By the power of your utterance, you will help to revive the sorely neglected faith of Muhammad, your illustrious ancestor. These words addressed to Sayyid Kazem excited the resentment and kindled the envy of the prominent disciples of Sheikh Ahmad, among whom figured Mullah Muhammad-e-Mamaqani and Mullah Abdul-Khalik-e Yazdi. So compelling was the dignity of Sayyid Kazem, however, and so remarkable were the evidences of his knowledge and wisdom, that these disciples were awed and felt compelled to submit. Sheikh Ahmad having thus committed his disciples to the care of Sayyid Kazem, left for Khorasan. There he tarried a while in the close vicinity of the holy shrine of the Imam Reza in Mashhad. Within its precincts, he pursued with undiminished zest the course of his labors. By resolving the intricacies that agitated the minds of the seekers, he continued to prepare the way for the advent of the coming manifestation. In that city he became increasingly conscious that the day which was to witness the birth of the Promised One could not be far distant. The promised hour, he felt, was fast approaching. From the direction of Nur, in the province of Mazandaran, he was able to perceive the first glimmerings that heralded the dawn of the promised dispensation. To him, the revelation foreshadowed in these following traditional utterances was at hand. Ere long shall ye behold the countenance of your Lord, resplendent as the moon in its full glory. And yet ye shall fail to unite in acknowledging his truth and embracing his faith. And one of the most mighty signs that shall signalize the advent of the promised hour is this: a woman shall give birth to one who shall be her Lord. Sheikh Ahmad therefore set his face towards Nur, and accompanied by Sayyid Kazem and a number of his distinguished disciples, proceeded to Tehran. The Shah of Persia, being informed of the approach of Sheikh Ahmad to his capital, commanded the dignitaries and officials of Tehran to go out to meet him. He directed them to extend a cordial expression of welcome on his behalf. The distinguished visitor and his companions were royally entertained by the Shah, who visited him in person and declared him to be the glory of his nation and an ornament to his people. In those days, there was born a child in an ancient and noble family of Nur, whose father was Mirza Abbas, better known as Mirza Bozorg, a favored minister of the crown. That child was Bahá'u'lláh. At the hour of dawn, on the second day of Muharram in the year 1233 AH, the world, unaware of its significance, witnessed the birth of him who was destined to confer upon it such incalculable blessings. Sheikh Ahmad, who recognized in its full measure the meaning of this auspicious event, yearned to spend the remaining days of his life within the precincts of the court of this divine, this newborn king. But this was not to be. His thirst unallayed, and his yearning unsatisfied, he felt compelled to submit to God's irrevocable decree, and turning his face away from the city of his beloved, proceeded to Kermanshah. The governor of Kermanshah, Prince Muhammad Ali Mirza, the Shah's eldest son and the ablest member of his house, had already begged permission of His Imperial Majesty to enable him to entertain and serve in person Sheikh Ahmad. So favored was the prince in the eyes of the Shah that his request was immediately granted. Wholly resigned to his destiny, Sheikh Ahmad bade farewell to Tehran. Ere his departure from that city, he breathed a prayer that this hidden treasure of God, now born amongst his countrymen, might be preserved and cherished by them, that they might recognize the full measure of his blessedness and glory, and might be enabled to proclaim his excellence to all nations and peoples. Upon his arrival in Kermanshah, Sheikh Ahmad decided to select a number of the most receptive from among his Shia disciples, and by devoting his special attention to their enlightenment, to enable them to become the active supporters of the cause of the promised revelation. In the series of books and epistles which he undertook to write, among which figures his well-known work Sharh-o-Ziyareh, he extolled in clear and vivid language the virtues of the Imams of the faith, and laid special stress upon the allusions which they had made to the coming of the Promised One. By his repeated references to Hossein, he meant, however, none other than the Hossein who was yet to be revealed. And by his allusions to the ever-recurrent name Ali, he intended not the Ali who had been slain, but the Ali recently born. To those who questioned him regarding the signs that must needs herald the advent of the Qa'im, he emphatically asserted the inevitableness of the promised dispensation. In the very year the Bab was born, Sheikh Ahmad suffered the loss of his son, whose name was Sheikh Ali. To his disciples who mourned his loss, he spoke these words of comfort. "Grieve not, O my friends, for I have offered up my son, my own Ali, as a sacrifice for the Ali whose advent we all await. To this end I have reared and prepared him." The Bab, whose name was Ali Muhammad, was born in Shiraz on the 1st of Muharram in the year 1235 AH. He was the descendant of a house renowned for its nobility, which traced its origin to Muhammad himself. His father, Sayyid Muhammad Reza, as well as his mother, were descendants of the Prophet, and belonged to families of recognized standing. The date of his birth confirmed the truth of the saying attributed to the Imam Ali, the commander of the faithful, "I am 2 years younger than my Lord." The mystery of this utterance, however, remained unrevealed except to those who sought and recognized the truth of the new revelation. It was he, the Bab, who in his first, his most weighty and exalted book, revealed this passage concerning Bahá'u'lláh. "O thou remnant of God, I have sacrificed myself wholly for thee. I have consented to be cursed for thy sake, and have yearned for naught but martyrdom in the path of thy love. Sufficient witness unto me is God, the exalted, the protector, the ancient of days." While Sheikh Ahmad was sojourning in Kermanshah, he received so many evidences of ardent devotion from Prince Muhammad Ali Mirza that on one occasion he was moved to refer to the prince in such terms: "Muhammad Ali I regard as my own son, though he be a descendant of Fat Ali." A considerable number of seekers and disciples thronged his house and eagerly attended his lectures. To none, however, did he feel inclined to show the consideration and affectionate regard which characterized his attitude towards Sayyid Kazem. He seemed to have singled him out from among the multitude that crowded to see him, and to be preparing him to carry on with undiminished vigor his work after his death. One of his disciples one day questioned Sheikh Ahmad concerning the word which the Promised One is expected to utter in the fullness of time, a word so appallingly tremendous that the 313 chiefs and nobles of the earth would each and all flee in consternation, as if overwhelmed by its stupendous weight. To him Sheikh Ahmad replied, "How can you presume to sustain the weight of the word which the chieftains of the earth are incapable of bearing? Seek not to gratify an impossible desire. Cease asking me this question, and beseech forgiveness from God." That presumptuous questioner again pressed him to disclose the nature of that word. At last Sheikh Ahmad replied, "Were you to attain that day, were you to be told to repudiate the guardianship of Ali and to denounce its validity, what would you say?" "God forbid," he exclaimed. "Such things can never be. That such words should proceed out of the mouth of the Promised One is to me inconceivable." How grievous the mistake he made, and how pitiful his plight! His faith was weighed in the balance, and was found wanting, inasmuch as he failed to recognize that he who must needs be made manifest is endowed with that sovereign power which no man dare question. His is the right to command whatsoever he willeth, and to decree that which he pleaseth. Whoever hesitates, whoever, though it be for the twinkling of an eye or less, questions his authority, is deprived of his grace, and is accounted of the fallen. And yet few, if any, among those who listened to Sheikh Ahmad in that city, and heard him unfold the mysteries of the allusions in the sacred scriptures, were able to appreciate the significance of his utterances, or to apprehend their purpose. Sayyid Kazem, his able and distinguished lieutenant alone, could claim to have understood his meaning. After the death of Prince Muhammad Ali Mirza, Sheikh Ahmad, freed from the urgent solicitations of the prince to extend his sojourn in Kermanshah, transferred his residence to Karbala. Though to outward seeming he was circling round the shrine of Sayyid Shohada, the Imam Hussein, his heart, whilst he performed those rites, was set upon that true Hussein, the only object of his devotions. A host of the most distinguished ulamas and mujtahids thronged to see him. Many began to envy his reputation, and a number sought to undermine his authority. However much they strove, they failed to shake his position of undoubted preeminence among the learned men of that city. Eventually that shining light was summoned to shed its radiance upon the holy cities of Mecca and Medina. Thither he journeyed, there he pursued with unstinted devotion his labors, and there he was laid to rest, beneath the shadow of the Prophet's sepulchre, for the understanding of whose cause he had so faithfully labored. Ere he departed from Karbala, he confided to Sayyid Kazem, his chosen successor, the secret of his mission, and instructed him to strive to kindle in every receptive heart the fire that had burned so brightly within him. However much Sayyid Kazem insisted on accompanying him as far as Najaf, Sheikh Ahmad refused to comply with his request. "You have no time to lose," were the last words he addressed to him. "Every fleeting hour should be fully and wisely utilized. You should gird up the loin of endeavor and strive day and night to rend asunder, by the grace of God and by the hand of wisdom and loving kindness, those veils of heedlessness that have blinded the eyes of men. For verily I say, the hour is drawing nigh. The hour I have besought God to spare me from witnessing, for the earthquake of the last hour will be tremendous. You should pray to God to be spared the overpowering trials of that day, for neither of us is capable of withstanding its sweeping force. Others, of greater endurance and power, have been destined to bear this stupendous weight. Men whose hearts are sanctified from all earthly things, and whose strength is reinforced by the potency of his power." Having spoken these words, Sheikh Ahmad bade him farewell, urged him to face valiantly the trials that must needs afflict him, and committed him to the care of God. In Karbala, Sayyid Kazem devoted himself to the work initiated by his master, expounded his teachings, defended his cause, and answered whatever questions perplexed the minds of his disciples. The vigor with which he prosecuted his task inflamed the animosity of the ignorant and envious. For 40 years they clamored, "We have suffered the pretentious teachings of Sheikh Ahmad to be spread with no opposition whatever on our part. We no longer can tolerate similar pretensions on the part of his successor, who rejects the belief in the resurrection of the body, who repudiates the literal interpretation of the Miraj, who regards the signs of the coming day as allegorical, and who preaches a doctrine heretical in character and subversive to the best tenets of orthodox Islam." The louder their clamor and protestations, the firmer grew the determination of Sayyid Kazem to prosecute his mission and fulfill his trust. He addressed an epistle to Sheikh Ahmad, wherein he set forth at length the calumnies that had been uttered against him, and acquainted him with the character and extent of their opposition. In it he ventured to inquire as to how long he was destined to submit to the unrelenting fanaticism of a stubborn and ignorant people, and prayed to be enlightened regarding the time when the Promised One was to be made manifest. To this Sheikh Ahmad replied, "Be assured of the grace of your God. Be not grieved at their doings. The mystery of this cause must needs be made manifest, and the secret of this message must needs be divulged. I can say no more. I can appoint no time. His cause will be made known after hen. Ask me not of things which, if revealed unto you, might only pain you." How great, how very great is his cause, that even so exalted a personage as Sayyid Kazem, words such as these should have been addressed. This answer of Sheikh Ahmad imparted solace and strength to the heart of Sayyid Kazem, who, with redoubled determination, continued to withstand the onslaught of an envious and insidious enemy. Sheikh Ahmad died soon after, in the year 1242 AH, at the age of 81, and was laid to rest in the cemetery of Bahá'í, in the close vicinity of the resting place of Muhammad in the holy city of Medina.